Dia Chachara, hello my friend, and welcome back to the Changeling's Call, where I read you chapter by chapter of my book, my fantasy book, in an attempt to bring more whimsy and magic into this dark world. So today we are on chapter 15, Training, and this is medium length one, like 14 pages, so settle in with a nice beverage and enjoy. The next morning, they ate some leftover stew and checked the maps. Shayla talked about how excited she was to see the High King's castle and meet the princess, but Orla had a feeling she was disappointed that the trip to meet her mother would now be greatly delayed. She would have to make it up to her. When they finally made it back to Ballyshannon, she would stay a long time visiting and introduce her to all the nicest young people in town. It was decided they would head north on foot until they got to Ballyhonus, where they would try to purchase 4 horses. That left them still traveling on foot for 3 to 4 days. Why don't we open a doorway to the Fey world, get some winged horses, fly to the Hill of Terra, and then come back into the human world? Orla asked, feeling impatient. Because the opening of a new doorway does not go unnoticed, explained Finn. It would be like sending a smoke signal to the Unseelie, telling them exactly where to find us. Besides, it's technically not allowed and would take all my power. Right, well, at least it's still summer, so we have good weather for walking, Orla said, trying to sound positive. Yes, said Aiden, but we're getting close to October now, and the veil between the worlds is thinning. That won't help us if the Unseelie are going to try to throw us off course by trying to cause havoc with the humans. Well, there's nothing we can do about the passing of time, Aiden, reminded Orla, growing irritated at how complex this was becoming. We just have to move as quickly as possible. So they began on their new course, this time with a much more subdued mood between them all, as they all thought about Orla's dream and what it might mean for them. When they paused at midday to refill their water skins, Danny brought up something that had been worrying him. Do any of us even know how to fight? I don't. I'm a farmer. Shayla and Orla shook their heads. I only know how to fight with magic, and that's just a few minor jinxes mostly, said Aiden a little sheepishly. Physical fighting is considered a bit crass among fairies. Well, the leprechauns aren't so hoity-toity as that, lucky for us, Finn said with a chuckle. Sure, I've been scrapping since I was a wee one. It's not complicated, you know. You learn the weak spots of the body, and that's where you hit them. You hit them, and you dodge. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. It all comes down to practice. I can teach you tonight when we make camp. Orla looked at Danny with an eyebrow raised. They were going to learn to fight from a leprechaun? Well, he was very fierce and powerful in his own way. Any training had to be better than nothing. Orla had never been in a real fight before. She thought of the night she ran away from home. If something like that happened to her again, it would feel a lot better if she knew how to hurt the other person before they could hurt her. She resolved to practice hard and learn as much as she could in the next few days. They were now passing through some very fine farmland and pasture land. The green hills were dotted with white and black sheep, and they saw the occasional shepherd. Shayla had never seen sheep before, and she was smitten. Do people keep them as pets? She asked, petting a lamb. No, Orla answered. They're not very affectionate, or intelligent, honestly. Shayla's eyes widened. Surely they don't eat them? Orla grimaced. Well, sometimes they'll eat the young ones, but mostly people just raise them for their fleece. They shear it off and make woolen cloth. It doesn't hurt them. Well, I would like to have a flock of them, Shayla said. They're very sweet. You're in luck then, because your mother has one of the handsomest herds of sheep in Galway, Orla boasted. Shayla laughed. Can a sheep be handsome? Oh, aye, and they can be ugly, assured Finn, like those miserable creatures over in Dingle. He took a breath. There once was a shepherd from Dingle. He'd no lambs, for his dams were all single. When asked why his rams would not mate with his dams, he replied, They're too ugly to mingle. It was a silly limerick, but he said it with such a deadpan tone that it struck them all as hilarious, and Finn was much gratified by their laughter. But as pleasant as the landscape and the weather was, they had to turn their minds to darker matters. Even with Orla's dream giving us some idea of what the Unseelie may be planning, we have to be aware of our disadvantage, explained Finn. Because if there's one important thing to remember about mischief and evil, it's that it is by nature unpredictable. Now hang on, interrupted Orla. My dad always used to say that an evil man was predictable because he would always do the wrong thing. But a decent man was unpredictable because he may do the right thing, the wrong thing, or nothing. With all due respect to your departed father, lass, he must not have known about the Unseelie, replied Finn, because the Unseelie are half mad and fully devious. The tricks they pull are often done without any plan, on a wild whim. Other times, their evil work is a complicated and well-plotted scheme. So if they're so unpredictable, how do we plan to thwart them? Asked Danny. I think the goal is to get as close as we can to the princess first, said Aiden. Then some of us will keep a lookout for her safety, while some of us try to locate the Unseelie before they get to her. That makes sense, mused Orla, but what do we do once we find them? We wouldn't try to kill anyone, right? No, of course not, assured Aiden. Killing Fae is a crime in Titania's realm, even if they are Unseelie. But many of the Unseelie are craven, and if faced with a fight, they would most likely not last long before they turned tail and ran home. Depends on who it is and how many of them there are, argued Finn. If they think they have the advantage, they may stay and fight. If that happens, we'll signal to the other team to join us. Orla was starting to feel guilty again, thinking of what could happen in such a fight. Should we try to get some armor as well when we go to purchase horses? Finn shook his head. It would do little more than slow you down. You might throw punches and blades, but the Unseelie will fight only with magic. It will be wards and charms you'll need to keep you safe. Nothing can make you invincible, but there are ways to increase your luck and increase the damage done from offensive spells. I can show you how to craft some basic protection charms. Everyone keep an eye out for red or green stones, owl pellets, and feathers. So they all paid close attention to the ground they passed over, and it turned out that Danny and Shayla were very good at spotting things, and the two found several rocks. This increased attention to the land around them also helped them spot some useful healing herbs, some wild onions, and of course more mushrooms, much to Danny's chagrin. By the time they stopped to make camp, Shayla's pockets were full of treasures, though they were still without any owl pellets. After a passable meal of onion and mushroom stew, Finn made good on his promise to teach them how to fight. To do it safely, he used an impressive bit of magic they hadn't seen him do before. He created an illusion to make himself appear 6 feet tall. This way, he could act as a target for their blows without actually getting touched, since his real body was little more than 2 feet tall. Wow, Finn, you're a handsome fella at eye level, Shayla teased, only halfway joking. He did have a charming face, if somewhat cat-like, and his dimples were very cute. He coached them while dodging lightly side to side. When it was Orla's turn, she was self-conscious at first, but quickly got the hang of it, until it started to actually be rather fun. The group cheered as she landed her 4th blow in a row. Then Danny asked to take his turn. When all had gone through the exercises, they were feeling pretty good. Great work, everyone. Tomorrow night I'll have you try it with me fighting back. Orla laughed. I was feeling so powerful, I forgot that you were only dodging. Don't worry, lass. Dodging is just as simple, if not simpler, than throwing blows. You will get there. Then the humans took a rest, and Finn and Aiden practiced fighting with magic. Aiden only knew a few attacks, so Finn taught him the ones that he knew. This type of fighting was very interesting to watch. Once Finn was satisfied with his progress, they stopped their sparring, and Finn advised them all to get some rest. Soon everyone had fallen asleep except for Orla and Finn. Finn seemed to be quietly contemplating for a change, and he stared blankly at the fire while blowing tiny smoke rings from his wood pipe. Finn, why have you stayed by me? You could be home with your family, or out having fun. It's really no benefit to you if I get my wings. Finn broke from his reverie and took the pipe from his lips. I don't have a family to go to, truth be told. I thought I would, but that's not how things came to be. Orla could feel a story coming on and was very invested, because Finn rarely spoke of himself and never of his past. Back in dear Caledonia, I knew a lass who was more fair than I can say. Her name was Aisling, and she had long red curls, blue eyes, and the most shapely bosom you've ever seen. Her voice was like a bell, and she was kindness and goodness made flesh. I was smitten, head over tail in love. I courted her, and she told me she loved me. I told her ma and her pa that I intended to ask her to marry me, and they gave me their blessing. On the day I was going to propose to her, I wore my finest suit and combed my hair. I was still at their house before breakfast, so eager was I. But instead of being met by Aisling, 'twas her mother who opened the door, with her eyes all red with crying. Aisling had been taken in the night by the Unseelie. What? Orla cried softly, not wanting to wake the others. But why? Why would they take an innocent leprechaun girl? Finn looked very sorrowful. She could have been taken as a stolen bride, or they could have just taken her as a pretty slave. Either way, I knew I couldn't get her back. One leprechaun against the Unseelie? I would have died trying. Maybe I should have. I thought about it for a while. Her parents begged me not to. They said Aisling wouldn't have wanted me to get hurt. Orla was furious. They can't just take people away and get away with it. I think we should try to get her back. Finn's eyes widened. Sure, I'd love to get her back more than anything, but it's a fool's errand, lass. And in case you forgot, we already have a princess to save, which will be trouble enough. I didn't forget, but once we save Bridget, we will go back to the fairy realm and find Aisling. Maybe it won't even have to be a fight. Maybe we can challenge them to a contest of some sort. Finn considered this. They are a competitive lot. But Ashlyn's already there, so to get them to play, we would have to offer them something more if they win. So we come with a prize. What do the Unseelie like? Finn laughed. They like fine things that aren't theirs, gold, jewels, magic, and rare animals. Unlike the Seelie, they don't care as much for plants and flowers. Well, maybe the king will reward us if we save his daughter, and then we'll have a suitable prize. You already helped me so much, Finn. I want to help you get her back. Finn looked pleased, but he shook his head. Don't think of it now. We have to focus on the quest at hand. Who knows if she even cares for me any longer? She might be disappointed that I didn't come for her straight away. Now get some rest. The next morning, they were awoken by the bleating of sheep, and rose to find themselves in the middle of a herd of at least 200. Finn turned back into a cat as the shepherd approached them, a kindly older man named Thomas. He gave them some welcome news. They were less than 2 days' travel to the next town of Ballyhannes. Thomas laughed at them for traveling with a dog and a cat, but he wished them the best of luck and gave them some cheese before heading in the opposite direction as theirs with the sheep. Humans are nice, commented Aiden, and not nearly as dangerous as my parents said. Unfortunately, they're not all like that, Orla said, thinking of her wretched stepfather, but most of them are kind-hearted. Since they could eat the cheese while walking, they decided to try and go the full day without stopping, so as to try and reach the town by nightfall. Shayla and Orla both had been given some gold by Saoirse, so they would hopefully be able to get horses and some supplies for the road. The train was easy and they made good time, stopping only to fill their water skins. They came into a beautiful green valley divided by a small, sparkling river. This area was inland enough that none of the forests had fallen victim to the shipyard's greed, and they passed many old trees. Finn told them that in the fairy realm, these trees would be home to a community of dryads. The party was delighted to see smoke rising as twilight began to fall, which was a sure sign that they were approaching Ballyhannes. They decided to make camp since people were less welcoming to strangers who arrived at night. This was agreed to grudgingly by the humans because they longed for a good meal, but Finn and Aiden didn't seem to mind living on a diet of mostly mushrooms. Danny choked the mushroom soup down in a few gulps and was ready before anyone else to get back to training. Finn again did his illusion of making himself human-sized, but this time he threw punches, which they all did their best to dodge. Everyone was pretty good at it, except for Orla. When you see my fist coming, you have to move, lass, Finn said in exasperation as his fist impacted harmlessly into her shoulder for the 4th time. I'm trying! Orla was starting to feel embarrassed, which only served to make her movements more erratic. Finally, Finn told her to call it a night, and they all got comfortable for sleep. Orla was feeling pretty low. Shayla was lying near her and whispered to her, Hey, it's okay. Finn said they'll be fighting with magic anyway. I don't think you'll even have to dodge any punches. Orla smiled. Thanks, Shay. You're a good friend. Shayla shook her head. We're more than friends. We're sisters. She wrapped an arm around Orla and they fell asleep nestled together. In the morning, the company broke camp quickly, as they were all eager to make it into town. Orla was looking forward to making faster progress on horseback, and Danny and Shayla were eager to buy some better food. Aiden was just curious to see a larger human village. Finn was the only one who didn't seem excited, maybe because he had to turn back into a cat. The town of Ballyhannes had around 200 homes, in Orla's estimation. It was well established enough to have a main street as well, with a combination of shops and houses with a store in front. They had a small church, a general store, a smithy, an inn, a pub, and even a haberdasher. Aiden was drawn to the church. It was definitely the prettiest building in town, with a high roof and steeple and 4 arched windows with real glass. What is the purpose of this building? He asked, impressed. It's a church for worship, replied Danny. And which gods do they worship? Danny laughed. Nobody honors the old gods in a church like that. They'll be praying to just one god. One god, exclaimed Aiden. One god in charge of everything? Ridiculous. Hush, you'll get us thrown out of town for being heathens, cautioned Orla. Or worse, if they're zealots. People take religion seriously. You probably would too if you knew you were going to die one day. The people in the town seemed to be doing much better than the people of the last village. There were children running around barefoot, but all the adults were well dressed and shod. The group got some curious looks, but nobody demanded they identify themselves or made them feel unwelcome. It was decided that Aiden and Danny would go to the pub and ask around to find who had horses for sale, since people were more likely to take advantage of a woman buyer. Orla gave them her purse. The rest of the group went to the general store to find more supplies. The store was a small wooden room lit by the daylight coming in through glassless windows. The windows had shutters to secure the building at night. Inside, they found a friendly shopkeeper's daughter and a good selection of items. They sold beeswax candles, oats, flour, dried meats, dried fruits, honey, cheese, chicken eggs, and several berry pies. They had enough gold in Shayla's purse to buy the whole store, and Orla had to remind herself that it would be very greedy and suspicious if they did so. After some discussion, they decided to buy large portions of the dried meats and fruits, a dozen eggs, and 2 small wheels of cheese. They spent so much coin, the girl gave them a strawberry pie for free. Very pleased with their purchases and hoping that the boys had done as well, they made their way to the public house. And there they found Aiden and Danny deep in discussion with a lively old man with impressive facial hair. They appeared to be haggling, so rather than interrupt, they inquired about renting rooms for the night. The innkeeper was happy to reserve them 2 rooms and let them know that they were welcome to a bowl of stew with bread that evening included with their fee. The innkeeper was a very smiley little man named Sam, and he happily showed them up to their rooms, where they were finally able to put down their heavy armfuls of food. The rooms were small but comfortable, each with 2 narrow beds and a greased paper window. They came back downstairs to find the men getting close to an agreement. The old man looked happy. Aiden and Danny looked a little defeated. The man shook their hands and left. Danny noticed the girls' emotion for them to sit down. Finn was curled up beneath the table, trying not to be noticed and thrown out by the innkeeper. "So, did you get us our horses?" asked Orla hopefully. "Sort of," replied Danny. "He drove a hard bargain, but we got a fair enough price. The thing is, he only had 2 horses and a mule. And he says that's all there is to be had in town." "A mule?" exclaimed Orla. "Well, they're not as handsome, but they have good stamina. They tend to be stubborn, though." "According to old Mr. Murphy, this is the finest and most temperate mule ever born, and her name is Daisy," said Aiden, sounding glum. "And the horses are also paragons of the species, brothers named Thunder and Rain." "Why not Thunder and Lightning?" asked Shayla. Aiden smirked. "Apparently Lightning is the fastest horse in Ireland, and Mr. Murphy was not willing to sell." "It's all right," reasoned Orla. "Me and Shayla can double up on Daisy, and Finn can ride with one of you. I suppose we'll have to part ways with Bonnie." At this, Finn stood up and swiftly stole from his hiding place and out the front door, presumably to go talk to the dog. "Well, we got enough food to last us until we get to the king's castle," informed Shayla. "And you'll be glad to know that none of it is mushrooms." "So how much money did you spend?" Orla asked. "All of it," Danny said with a grimace. "Horses are very dear around here. He said there's only 4 in town. We've reduced their horse population by half." "That's all right," Orla said, taking out the other purse. "We still have a bit left if we need anything else." Soon, Old Man Murphy returned with a very large mule and 2 smallish horses. "Good Lord, what size horse sired this mule?" asked Danny. "Her ma was a grand big horse," exclaimed Mr. Murphy. "And his pa were but a wee ass. Sure, I put them in the pasture together, never thinking she was in any danger from him, but love knows no bounds, and you'll imagine my surprise when I found him climbing up her one day. I separated them, but it was too late. And the reward for my negligence? Look, she's the finest mule you've ever seen. Swift as a horse and strong as a donkey. It's a real hardship letting her go." His eyes shone with tears. He must really want to make them feel like they got a good bargain, even though he'd charged them for the price of 4 horses for 2 and a mule, thought Orla. Thunder was a pretty, sweet-natured black and white horse, and Rain was pure white. Sam showed them to a small stable in the back and gave them some hay. Orla and Shayla were very excited that the inn boasted a washroom with a bathtub because they were feeling very ripe after days of traveling without a full wash. They rushed back upstairs to get there before having to wait in line. The boys stayed and groomed their new horses, wanting to establish some trust and familiarity in the animals. The girls came back much refreshed and announced that the stew was being served. They chose a long wooden table near the fireplace and were served large bowls of thick hot rabbit and potato stew, along with generous slices of brown soda. They each got a pint of ale too, but Shayla gave hers to Danny, as she said she hadn't had it before and found it disgusting. Orla usually found ale unpalatable too, but this was a surprisingly good brew, and it went very well with the stew. Halfway through their meal, a bard came in and began playing his flute. He also sang a few songs, and he had a fine voice. Danny asked Shayla to dance, and Orla was surprised to see he was a good dancer. She wanted to dance too, but she didn't want to take Shayla's dance partner, and Aiden was engaged in conversation with a local farmer. Finn was curled up asleep by the fire in cat form. A handsome young man with a long mass of red curls locked eyes with her and came over to their table. "Good evening, miss. Will you honor me with a dance? My name's Jamie." He had a bit of a Scottish accent, which Orla always found charming, and a winning smile. "Actually, I was just about to ask her to dance," interjected Aiden. "I'm sure you had your chance," Jamie said, frowning, "but you didn't take it, and I asked first." "It's fine, Aiden. I was just thinking that it would be nice to dance. Jamie, I'm Orla." She stood up and took his offered hand. Jamie turned out to be a decent dancer, and they were immediately having a good time. When Orla looked back at their table, Aiden had gone. Had he been trying to protect her, or was he jealous? She wondered if she should go look for him. But then they began a dance where dancers exchanged partners, and Shayla wanted to join in, so she stayed. 20 minutes later, the pub was starting to empty. Apparently, these folk went to bed early. Aiden reappeared with a book and sat beside Finn to read. Orla loved books, though she had never been able to get her hands on very many. Something about seeing Aiden reading made him seem very cultured and attractive. The bard quit playing and took many deep bows, obviously waiting for tips. No one in the pub moved to open their purse, so Orla gave him a coin. With the music over, they all decided to go up to their rooms and get a head start on enjoying sleeping on real beds. Shayla and Orla stretched out on their beds and sighed happily at the comfort they used to take for granted. "What a great day," said Shayla. "I'm so glad I came." Orla smirked. "You and Danny have grown rather close, haven't you?" Shayla blushed. "We're just friends. He's quite clever, don't you think? And he has fine, broad shoulders." "I never noticed," replied Orla. "Probably because I don't have a big fat crush on him." Shayla gasped and made as if to whack her with a pillow. "I do not! I just think he's nice. What about you and that handsome red-headed fellow?" Orla shrugged. "I'll probably never see him again after we leave tomorrow. Anyway, he smelled a bit like a pigsty." Shayla started laughing, which proved to be infectious. They talked for a little longer, but soon the soft beds and warm blankets were too soothing, and they fell asleep. That's the end of chapter 15. Thank you so much for reading with me today. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and join me next time. Slan!